I'm super excited to be able to have some time today with Joe Guerrero and Sandeep Diva from Exdion. Exdion's been a really great partner of Catalyit. I'm very excited about what Exdion's doing for agencies and how they're helping agencies grow and scale and take care of some really important work that needs to be done, but in a much faster, much more accurate way. So I don't want to steal any more of their thunder because they're going to tell us a little bit about what Exdion does for agents. But first, I just want to kind of turn it over to Joe Guerrero and Sandeep Diva. Thank you so much for some of your time today.
Thank you so much, Casey. Thank you
Yeah.
for having us.
Awesome.
I'll start off with the introductions. My name is Sandeep Diva. I have been with Exdion from its inception. I was one of the co-founders. So when we started off, I'll start with, where we initially started off and how I got introduced to insurance. Right. So that's going to give you a complete picture. I was in software development in my prior life. So I was a Java programmer. So I used to do a lot of that stuff. And suddenly I thought maybe I have a degree in finance, and I thought maybe I want to do something in finance. So I went and got into mortgage broking. So I spent a few years there. And then I got an opportunity in an organization called Cross Domain. Now, that's the parent company for Exdion. This was way back in 2005. So when we started off over there, it was back office, processes, BPO kind of a story, where we were trying to do a lot of offshore work like policy checking, getting lost runs, doing summary and stratification, certificates, and all of that stuff. So there was one of the top four brokers in the US at that point in time decided they wanted to do a trial with opening shop in India and doing some of the back office work here. So we started off with like 100 people at that point in time, and cut to 2012. We were around 2,500 people by that time. So it really took off. People liked what we were doing. The main reason for the organization and the people within the organization, liking what we were doing was because we always focused on innovation. We tried to look at a problem and see how technology could play a part, or if we could do things that could streamline the process. Always question, the process and say, why do you want to do it like this? I mean, what was the reason for that? So that helped. And in 2012, at that point in time, the organization that we were working with decided that they did not want to be, working with like an offshore partner, but wanted to be more involved, and said that they wanted to take over the organization. This was, initially in 2005, that was one of the terms that we'd all agreed to. So at that point in time, the work started. I had an option to continue doing what I was doing in that organization, but a few of us decided that maybe it's time, that we take the plunge and look at other things. By that time, the writing was on the wall, right? We knew that in some time, this whole idea of transferring information, which was, client information and stuff like that across borders, is going to be a problem. That was not the solution. There's going to be security, and privacy concerns in a big way. And we started thinking about how we could bring in technology to address some of these things. Policy taking was incidentally one of the things that we'd done in a big way. We had, by the time I think in 2013, 14, we were around 700 people doing policy taking alone. So there was a lot of experience that we had garnered by the time. So we started exploring what we could do on using technology. So in 2016, started a company called Exdion. By 2018, we had an initial model by using RPA initially to do policy taking for like 3 questions, the forms related questions. And then 2019, we had 10 questions. We started using AI, and the AI was evolving at that point in time. So, we had some background. So I come from technology background, right? So started exploring things. So 19, we went out and we offered our uh, product, and I think there was a couple of big brokers in the US who initially looked at it and said, this looked like magic to us. I mean, like, can you really get something out in 5 minutes? That was unbelievable for them at that point in time. Oh, we signed up. Cut to today, we service five of the top 10 brokers. And we just don't do policy checking. We do quote compare. We do exclusions. We do forms compare, gradation, coverage analysis, summary of insurance. So there's a lot of other services that we've added on. And each of these services can be used independently. It does not have to be bundled. It's a bouquet of services. You can pick and choose what you like. So this is like pretty much how Exdion Insurance started. We have a division in healthcare too. It's called Exdion Health. The same time that we started doing stuff on the Exdion Insurance side, we also started working on healthcare. So Lohit, who's my colleague, a co-founder, takes care of the Exdion Health. He's the president of Exdion Health, and I'm the president of Exdion Insurance. Joe joined us in 2024. So I'll allow Joe to introduce himself and talk about his journey so far.
Yeah, that's perfect segue because I was thinking, yeah, Joe, I know I've talked to Joe a number of times. We're both in the North Texas area. So, yeah, Joe, can you tell
Sure.
us kind of your journey into Exdion and how you got there?
You bet, absolutely. And thanks again, Casey, and thanks to Catalyit for giving us this opportunity here. So yeah, my name is Joe Guerrero. I'm our client services manager. I'm based in our Dallas office here. And so yeah, my journey's kind of been I was a insurance broker at a middle market firm here in Texas for several years. So did the whole agent as a general agent, started when I first started, and then advanced into professional service lines and really focused on tech E&O and cybersecurity. And during my time, it was interesting just because I knew about this outsourcing model for policy checking, but truth be told, I mean, where I came from, we did it manually, inside. So it was a task that was put on the desk of the account managers and the CSRs. And when you're a broker, you have to work with these agencies different times of the month. When the workflow is there's peaks and valleys as to what time that they've got. And so support kind of comes into this to where can we work with, do business development work for the brokers? Oh, no, we can't. We're focusing on the account servicing. But I just remember my experiences of like, especially large package policies, how many hours, days it took to complete that stuff. But I always knew that there was an outsourcing model out there, but I knew some guys that were at like Lockton and Gallagher, but I was always of the impression that's only what the global guys can afford. The middle market and certainly smaller agencies, you got to make it up as you go, and it's an in-house thing. So when I was presented with this opportunity last year, it kind of opened my eyes that I didn't realize that this had evolved to this level. And then once I learned what Exdion had in the marketplace with number one with automation, but then when I gave its AI basically a test drive on a policy check, I was like, okay, I'm really interested in this. I want to be a part of this journey because this builds into like that larger narrative I think that's happening. Whereas AI is transformational, it's happening across all industries, but it's definitely having a huge impact on the insurance space as well. And you're seeing it from operations to claims to loss, risk mitigation. There's so many areas that it's going into, and it's only going to get bigger. And so that's the picture that we're telling to folks for our clients, and then also for people that we're meeting as well. That those that I think embrace this technology and kind of bring it in, they're the ones that are going to prosper in 5, 10 years. They're going to have that growth because it's going to enable them to, offload some of that kind of work and build a model for their team members where they're going to be able to add on more people, but give them, I think, more development opportunities versus that kind of grunt work, which has really been, for the past 20 years, that's kind of been the model of doing that kind of stuff, manually. So very excited about, yeah, where we can kind of take this business.
So it's really interesting that you just two things you said I find very interesting. I want to follow up on. One of them is that you said in the next 5 to 10 years. And what I've realized in the 6 months that I've been with Catalyt and the 2.5 years I ran Stackwise before that, I feel like a 5 to 10 year window at this point feels like 20 or 30 years. Like,
Yeah.
and it almost feels like most people that I'm talking to in this tech space, not necessarily the agency side, but the solution provider side, are almost hesitant to look at anything beyond like a 2 year runway because things are accelerating at a pace that is just blistering. And it's fascinating and fun, but it's also like, yeah, what's going to happen? Like 5 years seems like a lifetime from now.
No, that's a great point. And I look at it as kind of tiers. It's like the global ones, they're the ones that are really kind of lead the way. So to that point, yeah, I mean, in 5 years, there's areas that the global brokerages are going to be doing with automation and AI that, yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what they're going to be doing. Middle market will be much further along. But the good thing too is for even with, smaller agencies, they are now going to be where I think a lot of the global and middle market is today with automation because it's being able to be built at scale and at a price point that's allowing more people to get in and take advantage of these technologies. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's the every year is going to probably seem like 4 or 5 years of product development, certainly for companies like ours. So
Oh, for sure. And I also wanted to ask because my experience on the agency side, we were a 90 95% personal lines agency. So when I first learned about Exdion and what you all were able to help agencies with, and even today, it's still a little bit foreign to me because I don't have that firsthand personal experience, Joe, that you just mentioned in your introduction about, hey, when I was writing business, like this was a manual process. I think you said could take hours or even days. So
yes,
I I would like for my own education, but also I hope that if someone's listening to this with my experience or similar experience to mine, where they're like, I don't really know what this policy checking thing is. Could you kind of explain maybe what that process was like in a manual sense? Like, what did you have to do? And, I don't want you to have to go through every line item, but just in general,
sure.
what does that process look like to be effective?
I think the best way to answer this is I'll tee up a scenario and then I'm going to hand it over to Sandy to kind of talk about how we make it happen. But yeah, I'll just tell you, like as a broker, I mean, when you think about property coverages, when you think about fleet auto, equipment schedules, just the coverage forms themselves can be extensive when you've got to do a comparison between the current term, the prior term, and then you start comparing the proposal, the accord app, binder, schedule documents. It's extensive. And so, like I said, manually, you're talking about going in and out of different PDFs, Word documents, line by line reading. But one of the things I really see the value is what we're doing is on a forms comparison as well, because that is like being a lawyer almost. And they don't really train you for that. When you start with a brokerage, when you start getting into like pollution forms and like what I was doing in the latter part of when I was focusing a lot on cyber, every year the carriers are just changing those forms and there's just so much content. And there's a lot of pressure on agencies to make sure that we don't that you don't fumble the ball between last year's policy and this one, and you're missing an exclusion, you're missing a requirement, because it's really your responsibility to make sure that that client knows exactly what's being expected of them going into the renewal term. And so that's where I said automation and AI comes into play. And I'll let Sunny kind of talk about this is where we can kind of take a large amount of data and distill it down into basically about a 24-hour turnaround process. So yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
Thanks, Joe. It's magic. I mean, that's that's the way I describe it. But yeah, so what we do is or what we've started off with was initially being able to read an insurance document, right? So at the point when we started off, there were a lot of other organizations who wanted to do something similar. One of the early competitors that was there in the market at that point in time actually used a software that they were using for legal documents, interpreting legal documents. They used that because policy document is a legal document, right? They used it to be able to extract information. But what we did different, and why we, I think, succeeded, and why a lot of our clients like what we do, is because we have that insurance knowledge, and that was key to creating this application. So basically, we use your policy document. We've got 1,000+ data models built in for each specific data field, and it goes in, looks at it. So there's distance. So that's all scientific jargon, but basically to say that it actually measures everything. It actually looks at a document, plots out a chart for you, picks out each single word, where it is positioned, and all of that stuff, and then decides, whether it makes sense. There's natural language processing involved. There's machine learning. There are AI models that are involved. But all of these come together beautifully to be able to read, understand, and then compare between different documents. Like Joe mentioned, maybe you want to check your policy with your proposal, but then you also want to check it against the binder, then maybe the quote, or you want to look at your prior term policy. So this can do all of that in a couple of minutes, and generate a comparison between all of these documents. It can take one single document, extract all the relevant information, and create a beautiful summary that you could share with your clients, with a note saying, hey, these are the differences that we've seen, and we're working on fixing those differences. The client would know what you're doing, would be aware of the effort that you've been putting in on their policy to ensure that their businesses, are safe. They're, they're operating in an environment that is conducive for them without any hiccups. So our application does all of these things in a couple of minutes, sends it out to them, allows them to look at all that information and take preventive or corrective action wherever they need it.
Awesome. Okay, so I have a much better understanding then of what that might have looked like in the past, and of course, I have seen what it looks like now a number of times, and it's pretty great. The Sandeep, you brought up one point there about checking the binder to
Right.
compared to what you had received as a quote. It sounds like a scary question in my head, but is it common that there's a discrepancy from what was quoted to what was issued? I mean, because that's a huge value to the agency if there is, and does that happen from time to time? Like, do you have data on that?
Yeah, it happens a lot of times. What you ask for is not what usually comes across on your binder, especially in Joe talked about it, the forms part, right? There are these exclusions that become a part of it, which you're not aware. If you don't read the document completely, line by line, page by page, you would miss it. And then, hey, you have a claim, boom, you're responsible for that. So, which is not a nice place that you want to be in. So it is pretty common that happens. It happens across different lines of business, across all of the carriers that are there. And more often than not, some of those variances go through without being detected at all throughout the policy life cycle. And yeah, they're just lucky that nothing happened. But again, something happens, then you're left in the and you'd have to pay for it at that point in time. But we see that a lot of times.
Yeah, that's scary. Oh, sorry, Joe, go ahead.
No, I wanted to just add real quick to that too. And it's like, because what we're talking about really is, and a lot of I'm sure the listeners will appreciate this, is, it's E&O risk management for the brokerage. I learned this pretty early on when I got started. Is like, insurance is a has a much different place versus a business's other, like supply chain or, other partners, like even technology that they use. We have like a very, very different connection with that company because we're kind of involved on the finance side, on the liability side. It could be, either like a cyber breach, and like, for instance, when I was doing cybersecurity, insurance, there's areas where we're going to, provide some kind of, almost like I said, almost like counseling. When breaches and those kind of losses happen, you're paired up with legal counsel, and then the insurance carriers are involved. So there's a high amount of risk that the brokerages are taking on when they're working with these clients. And so there's like I said, there's a lot of pressure to get that right. And that's where the forms, especially when you get into like management liability, professional services, cyber, the forms can be so much. And if you just think about the day-to-day part of it, like I said, of manually going in and out of different documents and scanning. Now, there's a lot of professional CSRs that have been in the market for a long time that are really, really good at doing this manually. But I just think where our model really is coming into play is automate, let the AI, which can mirror that accuracy of a human being, and then kind of shift your process over to being more of a Q&A. The hard work of extracting the data, that's the tough part of it. It's just getting it all into a readable file, something that's digestible information that you can look at as a team. But I think where we show our value is to really kind of speed that up to go, let's get that hard part done and then get that in front of that experienced person. Because like Sandy said, what you're really drilling down on for is you're trying to find that discrepancy where it's like, okay, it's supposed to be, 50,000, it's showing us 5,000. Then you got to backtrack and figure out where did the gap happen here? Is this something that's us or is this something on the carrier? Do we have to get an endorsement? When you find those variances, it triggers all these other follow-up actions that have to be done. And so that's what we're trying to say is find those variances and then get to that work much faster. And that's where we feel like the value that we're trying to bring to the marketplace.
I had a weird comparison in my head. I remember when one of the like grand champion chess players played against a computer. Like I want to see like, have you guys ever had like a test where there was like a really experienced, ultra accurate human completing a policy check, and then have that same policy check go through Exdion and just kind of compare how they went through it, and then also analyze like the cost savings involved?
All the time. That happens all the time. So each time a brokerage decides to try our application, right? I mean, this
Yeah.
is something that we ask them to do. Like,
Oh,
hey, why don't you, check a policy and then have that policy run through our system? Now, after that, compare it. I mean, then let's see, we can both sit and have this conversation. We do something called as a checklist review after a trial is done.
mhm.
So we sit and we analyze the data and how the application is fared, and what it's pulled out. And 100% of the time, the application is, identified more variances than what a human would have done or has done. Some of those variances, maybe the human would have, said that this is not too important for me. I will, let that go. But the system checks everything, picks it out, and categorizes it in such a way that your most important ones are up there at the top, the ones that are, not really impacting your E&O part. So those go down. But yes, all the time that happens on every single, conversation that we have.
Gotcha. And to the E&O point, it was in my head, and then Sandeep, you mentioned it. Joe, you mentioned it. Do E&O carriers want to know if an agency is leveraging a tool for policy checking like XDN? I mean, is it like a car where, my truck has the blind spot monitoring and the backup beeping and all this other stuff, so I get a discount? Is there anything like that in the E&O space where they want to encourage agencies to leverage a tool like this?
Currently, it's not there in the market, but that's something that we're pushing for. We're having conversations with a few of the carriers. We're letting them know how it's going to impact their book of business, and a lot of people look at it. And one of our biggest, clients has actually used that as a preventive tool when they've gone in for their cover, which has actually worked well for them. So we want to have more use cases like that. So we are having those conversations and trying to put that across so that becomes a part of what the carrier asks for, in terms of risk mitigation with their clients.
Very cool. Very cool. So let's pivot just a little bit. I think that, everyone wants to always know what's next, even though a lot of people aren't necessarily current with what's current. So Exdion, I know, has probably a lot of plans for the next 5 to 10 years, or maybe 1 to 2 years, right, Joe? So what can you tell us about what Exdion's working on, or what agencies might be able to expect to see from Exdion in the near future?
Yeah. So I'll take that. Um, so what we've done so far has been revolutionary, right? In terms of what the application can do. So, for instance, now you can run a policy in it, and then you'll be able to see all the exclusions that are listed out, which is the primary reason why you have E&O claims. Um, so if we want to take that a little further, we are looking at how it's going to impact the customer experience and how we can personalize the service that we are offering to the end customer, which means that we are working with CSRs and account managers to be able to create services through, AI-led chatbots and these checklists that we deliver in such a way that the end customer can look at what's happening on the policy real time and how it's going to affect his overall insurance cover and his business. So we have started off on a journey where the risk mitigation before the business even goes in for insurance cover, it lists out all the relevant coverages that are needed for that particular business type, for that particular client within that geography, basis what's happening around them, and be able to put that in a format that is easily readable by the carrier and can come back with a coverage that fits them perfectly. We've looked at, or we're looking at um, um, a solution that can, it's not just based off of a checklist like it is today, but mostly driven through a conversation. Like, you and I are talking right now, and you just pose a question saying, hey, what do you think my uh, policy is lacking in terms of coverage? It'll list it out straight away. Or you can ask, what are the variances from on my coverage as compared to what I'd asked for, and it'll be able to list it, and then you can ask it to, you know, go ahead and request an endorsement. So it'll be that assistant for the CSR, the account manager, which, it can drive all of that back end work within the system, still give you complete control on what actions need to be taken, but be rest assured that the actions will be taken and there will be a definitive output that will be there for that particular policy. So we've planned everything out. We have started working on those things. Coverage gap analysis. We're looking at summary of insurance, like I told you, a beautiful message that goes out along with your policy checklist and the policy documents, and the exclusions. Now moving ahead, and not just talking about the exclusions that are currently there, but also start pointing out how certain hidden exclusions might impact your future businesses, future plans for the particular business. So these are some of the main things that we have started working on, and we think in the near future, in the next 12 months to 18 months, we will have a lot of these things in play and being offered to the customer.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds very much next level. It sounds like an advisory kind of a role in some ways, or certainly content creation and communication assistance, because I know that's always a challenge for a lot of agency staff. Joe, it looked like you were going to say something. I think I cut you off. Sorry.
Yeah, no, no. Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, like I said, it's like this going back to what I think we talked a little bit about earlier. I mean, it just kind of shows, I think, the potential of what AI can do, because when you have that kind of creativity behind it, and then the program can be kind of built to execute on these plans, then you start kind of getting into the space of, like you said, let's figure out how can we start kind of anticipating what these things are going to be, and that is something, yeah, that the role playing, kind of the scenario building is kind of going around of like, how do we anticipate these questions using like a chatbot or voice to kind of say, what am I missing? What do I need to do? And it's like that's kind of the next generation where this is. It's kind of we've kind of reached where we are and I think we've kind of built our model around extracting the data and building that version of policy checking. But now it's kind of like helping maybe that agency kind of take the next step. And like I said, that's where these type of interacting with a chatbot on the program or using voice as well to get an interpretive answer back. That's where you're going to see a lot of that coming up. I mean, we've already seen, most of us that were used to like with help desk going in and seeing, how can I help you in that chatbot, and that was kind of I think from what I've understood, that's kind of the generation one of where that help utility tool is going with AI. But now I think you're going to getting into these virtual assistants. You're getting into people that are going to be able to kind of like, with a bunch of different scenarios built in as to what they're expecting you're going to ask. Then when the person makes the ask, the system could then turn around and deliver what they're, basically the report of what they're asking for. So that's what I think we're going to kind of see in the next. But like you said, I mean, we're thinking 5 years, maybe it's a year or two to where you're going to see this model come out to say it's just it's an interpretation of what I'm asking, and then you're going to give me a deliverable report back.
That's amazing. And I also think that we're on the front edge, maybe, or at least in the insurance space, we're on the front edge of kind of the AI agents as well. And those tools that are going to be able to actually not just that came out wrong, but not give feedback and analysis, but actually go execute certain things.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, I'm curious what you see as, how do agency operations change in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years as more and more of these solutions become available, agencies become comfortable with them, and these processes that used to be manual are now being executed in a matter of minutes or instantly behind the scenes. How do you think that agency operations will change and evolve over the next 3, 4, 5 years?
Sandy, you want to start with that one?
Sure thing. Sorry, my camera is. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Yeah. So the agency operations are evolving pretty quickly, right? I mean, the last 10 years, the way the insurance industry has taken to technology and things and moved forward in adopting it has been phenomenal. When I initially got into insurance, everything was paper. You had to print out everything, sit down, and start marking things out. And from that stage to where we are currently where we are talking about AI and technology, and in terms of replacing a lot of the current processes that are there, it's moved miles in terms of the scope and what it's done. And that is continuing to happen. We're looking at a scenario where data-driven information is going to take center stage. We are already talking about, and this has happened in automobile insurance, where it is on-demand insurance. We're talking about insurance based on your usage, and it's every pie of your premium, basically every cent that adds on to your premium is driven by how you drove that car yesterday night. And it simply pushes up the dollar value or pushes down the dollar value based on what the experience for the last driving session that you had. And that is pretty much how it's going to happen across the board, even for large commercial policies. It's about breaking down the business operations of a client to units that are measurable in a way that impacts the insurance premium, which is, there are a lot of organizations already working on it. Exdion is one of those organizations who are working on solutions that are going to be on demand across the board for all sorts of lines of business. And this is not just automobile, we are talking about workers' comp too, and health insurance. And so this is an upward trajectory. In the next 5 years, insurance for me is going to look like it's going to completely look different. There are going to be new processes that are going to come in. People would learn, unlearn, learn new things, unlearn old ways of doing business, and all of those things are going to just make the whole insurance industry a lot more, faster in terms of how it moves and adopts technology and new processes.
And I'll add to that, Casey, that one good example I'll point out is, and I know this just from when I was working on cyber liability, is because they were making, I know the carriers in that space were making quantum leaps in using AI for, basically risk assessments. Where what's shifting in that marketplace is they're using AI not just to the old-fashioned, method of getting the application, getting the client's information, and then trying to assess, is this someone that we want to bring on and underwrite for policies? Now AI is able to kind of come in and assess, using basically a program to like assess that client in addition to the application to find out and then give these data results back to the carrier to figure out what are the pros and cons of taking on this client. So you're seeing that in cyber, and that just means like with the cyber controls, I know that the carriers are very much focused on who has like a higher investment on their cybersecurity versus someone who may be mid or lower, and then assessing whether or not they want to bring them on and what premium you're going to assign to that. But this year as well, so you're seeing that with property, especially with catastrophe risk mitigation, like with the fires in LA, and then with like hurricanes out in Florida, where I know they're really doing a deep dive with AI to kind of assess what's the viability of like a home in this street address in this region, or like a commercial building, or even a new construction. So you're going to see the carriers, they're making, like I said, huge strides in trying to figure out, do we want to take on this risk? And then what kind of premium do we want to charge for it? Which is a huge change between, as I said, in my time, to where you're really going off of application, you're going off of, attestation that's coming from the client as to what their financial, that kind of thing, and then assessing the building, condition and that kind of stuff as to what you want to sign. So AI is completely revolutionizing that. And then, like Sandy said, you'll see it going into the operation side of an agency just to improve the efficiencies and just help, I think, the employees just better use their time inside the firm, where you're going to be able to have people be a lot more productive because the AI is going to be taking on a lot more of the workload, I think.
That's fascinating. Yeah. There was a speaker at the Joe Vincent event for IIT who said, people in 5 years will be thinking about things that we've never thought about before, because so much of what we're using our brains for now will not be necessary because AI will be doing it. And that kind of blew my mind. And I feel like I was thinking about that same kind of logic as you guys were explaining what you think will happen. In
No, I
agency.
heard that as well, and I'll tell you an interesting aside is like, yeah, I heard also that the Ivy League schools are really starting to put an emphasis on like arts and that kind of creative thinking
Mhm.
to bring people into business. So it's kind of changing a little bit between, having an economics or law or like, business major. Now they're starting to think we need to have someone that can actually like think creatively, and even in arts majors are finding maybe where they're going to be able to be repurposed to come to like some of these companies and work in like a different role where they're going to be able to help management kind of creatively think about these solutions. But it takes someone that can kind of, like I said, think in abstract and that kind of theory and that kind of thing. And so that's something too that's, I think, just completely fascinating. And if AI can supplement that person coming in, you're creating almost a whole new job for new people to come into, fortune companies. And I think it'll also work its way down into the, private sector as well.
I agree. I agree. I think it's wild. It's wild. I think about the pre-internet, post-internet, which I'm young enough to know the pre-internet days, and I feel like this is another one of those moments that we're living through, or a point of transition, the pre-AI, post-AI. I think 15, 20, 30 years from now, we're going to look back and say, yeah, that was one of those really big developments that really changed everything for everybody. So awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for giving me some of your time. I know that that's the commodity no one has enough of. So I'm honored that you gave me some of yours, and I really appreciate the partnership Exdion has with Catalyit and what you're doing for agencies. We get great feedback, and I know it's making a big difference. So Yeah, I can't say thank you enough for all of the things that you're doing, and I really look forward to talking to you all again and in person, on the road, and also on the small screen here.
Thank you so much,
Perfect.
Casey, for having us. Really appreciate your time and effort. Thank you.
You bet.
Absolutely. Thank you, Casey, and thank you, Catalyit. We appreciate it.